I found a receipt from a 5-star hotel in my husband's pocket. When I casually asked him about it, he exploded, accusing me of being overly suspicious. Even our own son advised me to stop making a fuss at my age, saying that living a peaceful life is most important. But what they didn't know was that a text message from Michael, meant for someone else, was mistakenly sent to my phone. I witnessed him entering a hotel room, kissing another woman. 20 years of dedication had become a joke. I was done. Anyone who wanted to play the dutiful wife and mother could take over. Chapter 1. Mom, what's for lunch? At 12 o'clock, my son burst out of his room, looking at the empty dining table, unable to hide his surprise. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it and came back with bubble tea and shrimp. My son looked at me eagerly. I placed the takeout on the table and said coolly, "If you want to eat, make it yourself." He stared at me in disbelief, anger flashing across his face. "Have you lost your mind? No wonder Dad prefers Aunt Sarah. If I were him, I would too." I peeled the shrimp, the spicy aroma stinging my nose, causing my eyes to water. 3 days ago, I found a hotel receipt in my husband's pocket while doing laundry. I casually mentioned it. "Sarah seems to have stayed at this hotel too." Michael reacted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Jane, what are you insinuating now? Aren't you tired of being suspicious all the time?" His brows furrowed, looking exhausted. "I've told you many times, Sarah and I are just friends. It's a coincidence we stayed at the same hotel." Our son, playing on his phone, mocked me. "Mom, you're too old to be playing these games. It's embarrassing to even talk about it outside." Seeing I remained silent, Michael threw out a chat log with his boss. "Look closely, I was just arranging accommodations for a client. Sarah and I are completely innocent. It's your dirty mind that's the problem. Dad, don't you know? The older people get, the more suspicious they become. Mom, you should learn from Aunt Sarah. Go out more and stop acting like Sherlock Holmes. It's tiring for both Dad and me." Father and son turned their backs on me, clearly uninterested. But they didn't know, I not only knew it was Michael who booked the room but also who he booked it with. The night Michael and Sarah checked in, I stood outside the hotel all night. I saw them passionately kissing before they even reached the elevator. Michael's hands were gripping Sarah's waist as if trying to merge with her. Even after the elevator doors closed, I stood there, dumbfounded. My mind went blank. When I came back to my senses, tears were streaming down my face. I clutched my chest, finding it hard to breathe. Fragments of past events I had never noticed began to surface in my mind. Running into Sarah when I picked Michael up from the airport, the travel guides on Michael's phone. I finally realized that the so-called happiness was just an illusion. This marriage had been rotting in the shadows long before I noticed. But why? I knew Michael had an old flame he couldn't let go of. When we got married, I even said, "If you're not ready, we don't have to rush." He was the one who signed the marriage certificate first, pulling me into his arms, promising that he loved me now. I was anxious after getting married, but when our son was born 3 years later, I felt relieved, thinking my efforts had paid off. But after half a lifetime, thinking the past was behind us and happiness was ahead, reality hit hard. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. The ringing of my phone pulled me back to reality. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Michael. "Can you come pick us up? Sarah just got back and has a lot of luggage." Chapter 2. After the receipt incident, Michael didn't come home for several days, claiming he was working late. Now I see, he was probably with Sarah. I ignored him and continued peeling shrimp. Michael sent several messages asking where I was, and when I didn't reply, he called our son. I could hear my son's voice through his door. "Mom? She's at home. How should I know? She's lost her mind, not cooking or anything. You should deal with her, Dad." I didn't hear the rest, but by the time I finished eating the shrimp, my son had changed clothes and came running out, looking pleased. "Let's go. Aunt Sarah invited us to dinner." I smirked. I hadn't even looked for her, yet she was already acting like the host. Fine, let's see what she's up to. At the restaurant, Michael and Sarah were poring over the menu, his hand casually resting on her shoulder. My son happily greeted her, making Michael realize my presence. Seeing me, he quickly withdrew his hand, looking slightly uncomfortable. "You're here." I remained indifferent, choosing a seat farthest from him. Michael's discomfort vanished, replaced by a frown. "Flynn says you haven't been cooking at home. What are you doing all day, not even handling your basic responsibilities?" I hadn't said anything yet when Sarah interjected. "Michael, why are you speaking like that?" She smiled warmly. "Jane works hard taking care of you too. She deserves a break." "Jane, I recently joined a yoga class. The teacher is great. Would you like to join me? It's a good way to cultivate an interest and stay fit. What do you think?" My son immediately laughed. "Aunt Sarah, with my mom's stiff bones, are you asking her to do yoga or play a zombie?" Michael added, "Sarah, Jane can't compare to you. She's a housewife not suited for such refined activities." I lowered my eyes, hiding my irony. Had Michael forgotten that I was once the leading dancer of the provincial dance troupe? I had gradually faded from the stage only after marrying him and having our son. He claimed to want a good wife but now yearned for the independent woman he had turned me away from being. How absurd. Sarah coquettishly glanced at Michael before turning to me with a smile. "Jane, you know, as women, we need to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, if our husbands stray, we have no one to blame but ourselves, right?" Her seemingly kind words were laced with mockery. If I didn't know she and Michael had already been intimate, I might have been moved to spill my heart out. But now, I simply replied, "If a man strays so easily, it only shows he's cheap. I don't care for such a man. Let him go to other women." Sarah's face stiffened. Michael glared at me. "Jane, what's your problem?" I explained about the receipt. "You're the one imagining things." Chapter 3. I remained silent. Sarah tugged at Michael's sleeve, trying to calm him. "Let's enjoy the meal." She then turned to my son, serving him food. "Here, Flynn, this is your favorite." Michael's expression softened a bit, though he still frowned. "If only Jane was as understanding as you, I wouldn't have to worry." I sipped my tea. "Indeed, maybe Sarah should become your second wife and take care of me too. She wouldn't mind, right?" I looked at them with a hint of a smile. "Why don't you ask her?" My words were quiet but loud enough for the surrounding diners to hear, making them turn their heads. Sarah's face turned crimson. She stood up, her eyes red with grievance. "If you really don't welcome me, I'll leave. No need to ruin my reputation." She looked at me, hoping I'd back down. But I had no intention of playing along. "Why not leave then? Need me to see you out?" Sarah couldn't hold it in any longer and stormed off. "Sarah!" Michael stared at me, enunciating each word. "Jane, I suggest you apologize to Sarah, or I will never forgive you." With that, he chased after her. My son, wiping his mouth with a napkin, sneered. "Mom, Dad's really mad this time. You better think of how to apologize to Aunt Sarah." He stood up, giving me a contemptuous look, muttering, "Who do you think you are compared to Aunt Sarah? If it were me, I'd choose her too." He hurried after Michael and Sarah. I watched them leave, feeling a chill despite expecting it. This is the family I've managed for over 20 years. I gave my all, and in return, my husband cheated, and my son sided with the other woman. All my remaining hopes were crushed. From now on, I wouldn't expect anything from them. I finished my meal slowly, and when it was time to pay, the restaurant owner came over. She handed me a note with familiarity. "The lawyer is ready. Jane, don't relent this time." I nodded, looking at her graying hair, my nose stinging. "Thank you, Daisy." Daisy waved her hand. We've known each other for years. Don't mention it. I've kept the surveillance footage. We'll nail that scumbag. Chapter 4. Following Daisy's advice, I consulted a lawyer about the divorce. After years of marriage, the main issues in a divorce are usually custody and assets. I had no intention of fighting for custody, that left the assets. Thankfully, I had evidence of Michael's infidelity. The lawyer said I'd likely get a significant portion of the assets. After finalizing things with the lawyer, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I booked a tour, joining young people for an impromptu trip. Sarah was right about one thing: women should take care of themselves. After all, the money you save might be spent on another woman by your husband. Before boarding, I saw Sarah's post on social media. The text was simple. My family. The photo showed Michael in an apron holding a spatula, with my son washing fruit at the sink. Sarah's half-smiling face was visible, looking content. A happy family indeed. The same father and son who wouldn't even pick up a fallen broom at home were now cooking at another woman's house. How ironic. I smirked and liked her post, then switched my phone to airplane mode. While camping on a mountaintop and chatting by the campfire with fellow travelers, I received a text from Michael. It was the first message in days. He demanded I apologize to Sarah or not come home. I chuckled. It seemed they'd been so attentive to Sarah they hadn't noticed my absence. The laughter of my companions interrupted my thoughts. I put down my phone and quickly forgot about them. A month flew by. From the clear waters of Juzigu to the crescent moon lake in the northwest, I experienced the gentle charm of Jiangnan and the harsh winds of the northwest. Seeing the pristine snow of the sacred heavenly lake brought an unprecedented peace to my heart. In the past, my world revolved around Michael and our son. Now, having seen the world, they no longer mattered. Half a month passed quickly. While picking coconuts by the sea, Michael's calls came through incessantly. I took a sip from the coconut, savoring the taste. Where have you been? Flynn and I just got home, and there's a mountain of laundry. Come back now. Michael's irritated voice carried an undertone of panic. I could hear my son in the background. Mom, come home. No one's doing the housework. I calculated the time and realized the trip was about to end. I replied casually. All right, I'll be home soon. I have a gift for you. Chapter 5. Back home, opening the door, I was hit by a foul smell. The floor was littered with trash. The kitchen sink overflowed with dirty dishes, the source of the stench. On the balcony, the washing machine was open, stuffed with wrinkled clothes, with a full basin nearby. I shook my head in disbelief. Michael and our son rushed out of their rooms at the sound. After some time apart, they looked disheveled. Michael's shirt was wrinkled, and he seemed to have aged 10 years, no longer the dignified man he once was. Seeing me, Michael hesitated. After a moment, he frowned, maintaining his superior stance. Where have you been? You could have at least informed us. Sarah has forgiven you, let's move past this. I took out the pre-prepared agreement, handing it to him calmly. She may have moved on, but I haven't. He took it, and upon reading the words, his face changed. You want a divorce? Chapter 6. My son, hearing this, was in disbelief. Mom, are you crazy? I ignored him and continued. I don't want custody. The asset division details are clear in the agreement. Sign it. My son, red-eyed and agitated, shouted. Mom, I don't understand you. You were rude to Aunt Sarah first. She was kind enough to forgive you, and now you're the one causing trouble, wanting a divorce. You're too old to be acting like this. Where will you go after the divorce? You'll come crawling back. He urged his father. Dad, just divorce her. But Michael grabbed my hand, clenching his jaw. I don't agree. Is this all because of a receipt? I explained it. Why can't you let it go? I know you're bothered by Sarah. I liked her once, but that was years ago. She's been single all this time. Can't I be a friend and look out for her? Are you so petty? He rambled on, gripping my hand tighter. I pried his hand away, enunciating every word. Am I petty? Michael, you know exactly who you were with that night. He met my gaze, falling silent. Realization dawned on him, and his face turned ashen. You saw. I remained silent. Michael instinctively stepped back, nearly stumbling. Our son quickly supported him. Dad, what's wrong? If she wants a divorce, let her. We don't owe her anything. Shut up. Michael slapped our son. I watched, unmoved. My son, holding his face in shock, stammered. Dad, you hit me. Michael, red-faced, pointed at him angrily. How dare you speak to your mother that way? My son, deeply hurt, yelled back. You always said she's just a housewife, not as good as Aunt Sarah. Why is it okay for you to say it but not me? Why did you hit me? He ran out, tears streaming down his face. Michael, now hunched over, looked at me, his mouth opening and closing. I picked up the dropped divorce agreement, placing it on the sofa. Sign it and contact me. Let's keep things civil and avoid making a scene. I packed my things. As I was about to leave, Michael called out. Jane! His eyes were red. Can't you stay? I shook my head. Michael, 20 years have shown this marriage was a mistake. I don't want to continue this mistake for the rest of my life. He looked devastated. Once, I might have felt pity. Now, I only found it laughable. Who did Michael truly love? If he loved Sarah so deeply, why act so regretful now? Maybe he didn't love anyone. Perhaps he only loved himself. Chapter 7. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment, facing south with a spacious balcony. I started arranging it to grow some plants. Freed from endless housework, I now had time to pursue my interests. While browsing short videos, I saw a young girl dancing, her movements stiff. I left a comment with some suggestions. Initially, many criticized me for meddling. I didn't engage further. 2 days later, the girl posted a new dance video, her movements much improved, and she tagged me to thank me. Those who had criticized me came back to apologize. I smiled faintly but paused when I saw the girl's private message. Would you be interested in making dance tutorial videos? My memories flashed back 20 years. Back then, I was the lead dancer in the provincial dance troupe, shining on stage. I gave it up for Michael. Do I love dancing? Without a doubt. Though returning to the stage was unrealistic at my age, short videos offered another platform. Maybe I should give it a try. Just as I was excitedly planning my account, Sarah unexpectedly showed up. She looked the same, with her impeccable makeup, black stockings, and a cheongsam. Seeing me, she smiled. Jane, you're here. Stop. I pulled out a chair, sitting calmly. No need to pretend. It's nauseating. Her smile stiffened, but she quickly recovered, looking down at me. I heard you're divorcing Michael. She sipped her tea. It seems my text wasn't in vain. I narrowed my eyes. So Michael's booking message wasn't accidentally sent to me? Sarah's tone was slow. 20 years. I thought you'd endure it again this time. I smiled. 20 years, you've been a mistress, and now you needed me to initiate the divorce to take your place? Seems like Michael's love for you is worth questioning. Her expression faltered. I watched her grip her teacup until her knuckles turned white. After a moment, she regained her composure. Since you've initiated the divorce, just be straightforward. Don't cling to Michael. I'll be with him for the rest of his life. I stood up. Then hurry and get him to sign. There's still a 30-day cooling-off period. But since you've waited so long, another month shouldn't matter. I smiled slightly, ignoring her angry expression, and left. As I was about to unlock my door, Michael suddenly appeared in the hallway, startling me. Jane! I frowned. Have you signed the papers? Michael seemed lost, trying to grab my hand, but I avoided him. His hands fell limply. Jane, are you really giving up on 20 years? I interrupted him. First, I'm not giving up. You cheated, breaking our marriage vows. Michael, do you remember what you promised when we got married? You said you'd cherish me, love me forever, and be honest with me. I remained calm. Which of those did you keep? After marriage, I did everything for you, even bore you a son. What did I get in return? 20 years, Michael. You lied to me for 20 years. If I hadn't found out, were you planning to lie to me for the rest of my life? I forced back the bitterness. Enough, Michael. For the sake of my years of service to you, let me go. Jane. Michael wept, repeatedly apologizing. Chapter 8. Michael finally signed the divorce papers. I received more than half of the assets, including the house. Michael and our son, Flynn, moved into a small rental apartment that night. Flynn, pampered all his life, couldn't adjust to such a shabby place. I heard Michael was driven crazy by Flynn's complaints, and with Sarah playing the role of the understanding confidant, he eventually moved with Flynn into her house. At first, everything seemed fine, like a happy family. Flynn sent me several messages to gloat. Aunt Sarah's cooking is way better than yours. I've gained a few pounds. Her laundry detergent smells amazing. My classmates love the scent on my clothes. It's just housework. You think only you can do it? Once Dad and Aunt Sarah get married, you'll regret this. I laughed it off and continued recording my dance tutorials. I found some popular dances online. Creating instructional videos wasn't difficult, and the detailed explanations gained me many likes. People marveled at someone my age becoming a dance influencer. You dance beautifully, ma'am. Following your tutorials has saved my clumsy limbs. You're gorgeous and confident. I hope I can be like you when I'm older. One comment made me pause. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman with a smiling face, radiant and vibrant, no longer the old housewife I once was. I touched my face, realizing this was what life should be. Living for myself felt wonderful. On the day we finalized the divorce, Michael, Flynn, and Sarah were all there. Sarah, clinging to Michael's arm, looked smug. But Michael looked at me, his expression filled with longing. Jane! Sarah's face changed. I acknowledged them with a nod. Let's get this done. Afterward, Flynn and Sarah rushed to confirm the stamped divorce certificate, while Sarah sighed in relief. Flynn made a face at me. I was about to leave when Michael, ignoring Sarah's protests, called out to me. Jane, I saw your videos. His smile was strained, his eyes filled with nostalgic emotion. They reminded me of the first time I saw you. You were dancing on stage, and I was in the audience. Mr. Johnson. I smiled. Someone is waiting for you. Michael choked, realizing Sarah was behind him. I turned away, catching Sarah's resentful voice. Michael, are you regretting this? Flynn muttered. Why is she flaunting at her age? I stopped, walked over to him, and raised my hand. A crisp slap stunned everyone. Sarah rushed to shield Flynn. Jane, what are you doing? Flynn, are you hurt? Flynn stared at me, shocked. I looked back calmly. Flynn, I never hit you before. Flynn, I can pretend I never gave birth to you, but I can't let my failed parenting affect others. This slap is a lesson. Remember how to speak to your elders and what should and shouldn't be said. Seeing his defiance, I coldly added, Don't glare at me. From now on, I won't interfere in your life. Find whatever mother you want. Flynn clenched his fists, eyes red but silent. Sarah, enraged, shouted at Michael. Michael, are you just going to stand there? But Michael remained silent. Sarah, furious, turned to me, but I was already leaving. I walked away, feeling lighter than ever. From now on, my life would be my own. Chapter 9. I heard about Michael and Sarah again when I was on a plane abroad. By then, my dance videos had gained significant popularity, making me a renowned Chinese dance influencer. I was invited to participate in an international cultural exchange event. My friend Daisy sent me numerous updates about Michael and Sarah. It turned out Sarah never managed to marry Michael. Frustrated, she caused a scene at Michael's workplace, exposing their affair to everyone. Michael's boss, a family-oriented man, removed him from the promotion list because of his infidelity. Having lived with dignity for most of his life, Michael couldn't bear the gossip and eventually quit his job, opting to stay home. Poor Sarah, not only failing to secure a title but also having to house Michael and Flynn, essentially becoming their maid. Sarah's no pushover. One night, she had enough and called a moving company to throw their belongings onto the street. Imagine waking up on the sidewalk. I find it hilarious. I couldn't help but laugh. And Flynn? I heard he was expelled for spreading false rumors about a teacher. No school would take him. Who'd want a troublemaker like that? My smile faded. Despite everything, Flynn was still my son. I hoped he'd live a safe, smooth life. But it seemed neither my years of teaching nor that slap had any impact. Oh well, maybe this ordeal would help him grow into a responsible person, unlike his father. I shook my head. The airport announcement echoed and I boarded the plane. As it ascended, I looked at the vast blue sky. The past was behind me and the future was full of hope.